Greetings and welcome to Parenting in Wonder, how to help children experience the miracle of God's creation. I'm Brad Lyons, president and publisher of Chalice Press, the proud publisher of Wonder Awaits by Caroline Hamilton-Arnold. We appreciate that you're sharing a little bit of your time with us, especially those of you who are keeping an eye on the little people who share your house with you. At the heart of faith is curiosity about the world around us, about ourselves, about what God has created. As a publisher of faith-inspired resources, Chalice Press has recently started producing children's books, and Wonder Awaits is our second book for kids. It helps parents, grandparents, teachers, and others who work with babies, toddlers, and preschoolers help those kids see those wonders for themselves. And so that's where this discussion starts. We're joined by Reverend Caroline Hamilton-Arnold, also known as Campbell's mom, and the Associate Director of Week of Compassion, the disaster response ministry of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and by Reverend Allison Lanza, Spencer's mom, and the Minister of Operations and Outreach at Ridgely Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. Reverend Lanza is also founder and developer of Connect Ministries, a service learning ministry that provides opportunities for groups to put their faith into action through service and justice in ways that are relational, sustainable, and dignity-giving. Caroline and Allison, thank you both for your time and your creativity. I'm going to hand it over to you to help us understand a little bit better how we can help those kids around us see this big world that we live in. Thank you.
Thank you for believing in this book and in the vision that I had that it could be more than a Shutterfly book that I made for our family. My niece loved it, but it was pictures of her cousin, so of course she loved it. And thank you, Allison, for agreeing also to put your faith in the book and to share a bit of your life and Spencer's life with me in creating the book and with the families who will join us in Seeking Wonder as they share the book in their own homes. And when I first asked you if you might be willing to be part of the book, I said I was writing this book about seeking in our everyday lives, and would you be willing for photographs of Spencer to be included? And if I remember right, your response was, "Seeking Wonder is our favorite thing." And that gave me great confidence that others find the joy in this book that I had. And I wonder how you put into practice seeking wonder in your everyday life.
Yeah, that's been one of my very favorite things about being a parent to a little one is a lot of adult life does not involve a lot of imaginative play. And that's a thing I love to get to do. And I love to watch him discover. My son is 3 years old and I think was 2 when you first asked me this. And they're at that stage where they're just first asking, everything is new and everything is in awe. And I had so much fun getting to help him go be in awe with him. It helped me see the world, God's world again in a new way to go, yeah, oh my goodness, the way the ants move is amazing. Watch them go and watch what's happening with the squirrel. And we could sit and stare for a long time and watch the squirrel try to get the bird and the bird food. And so, yeah, that's what we love. And we especially, I think, did a whole lot more of that in 2020 than we might have because we were just at home together. And a lot of the things I probably would have used to fill our time going places, getting involved with other people, going on play dates, we couldn't do. And so we were just at home. And so we're able to see all these small things as new and wonderful. And so, yeah, that's what we love to do. I love watching him wonder. It's my favorite thing. And watching him be newly in awe of the world around us. And so, yeah, so I was excited to get to do it. I think, did you ask how we do it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we do it. Mostly, I let him lead the way. And I think that's what I've always done with kids in church too, is when they ask me questions to say back, I don't know, what do you think? Or let's, kind of like you put in the book, get close. Well, instead of, saying, oh, the squirrel does this, say, let's get as close as we can and really quiet and watch and see and to get close. And then to ask him, what do you think? And watch where he goes and just sort of follow his lead.
Yeah, absolutely. So much of that resonates with my experience too. I mean, Campbell was 10 months old when we first went into lockdowns and pandemic. And I've said other spaces, but all of a sudden our physical world got really small. And I was like, how do we parent a toddler? How do we expose him to the world the way we wanted to in this new reality? Especially because we live in Houston, this like vibrant cultural city that I was so excited to just like expose him to all these great, different experiences. And we couldn't do that. And then to be reminded that there are so many great experiences, like climbing up the woodpile in the backyard and walking around in our neighborhood and seeing, the decorations in people's lawns. Like people's lawn art became really, really exciting.
Yes.
And just learning about our neighborhood and about the snails that climb up the side of the house that I would get upset about because they were making trails on the side of the house. So fascinating and so wonderful. That it was such a great reminder to me of all of those like small reminders of the beauty and holiness that is in the world.
It's those little things.
Yeah, absolutely.
When Spencer's daycare finally reopened, I remember being really sad that we were going to miss trash day together because Wednesday had become this huge event where we celebrated the trash truck coming and we watched out the window and we cheered and we took Gatorade out to the driver. And I thought, when in my life have I ever been so excited for trash day? Exactly. But it's those little things that kids help us to see as new and adventurous.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we kind of touched on that a little bit, but how has the pandemic changed the way you understand wonder?
Yeah. I think it's made me see things that I would have always thought of as normal or mundane as amazing. And so, now now that we're getting to go back out and do stuff, I'm also seeing the world that I think he and I probably would have thought of as just regular as absolutely incredible. We went to his first restaurant not that long ago and we ate out on a patio and he could not believe that people were just going to bring us our food. He just, every time the waitress came back with food, he'd say, "You're just bringing this for me? Wow, thank you. Oh my goodness, Mommy, they brought, wow." He just thought we were king royalty having made it and people were bringing us food and how incredible. And he asked her if he could help take his plate back because he'd never been anywhere to eat that he didn't take his plate to the sink. And so I think it just makes the whole world seem more special. Seem that holiness that is in all things that we forget when we just see it as ordinary. It's made it holy again.
It's set up again. Yeah. I think for me too, it's a reminder of how interconnected we are and how much we affect one another and also how much we need one another. Just how important our relationships are and just the sheer delight in being able to give somebody a hug is something that has really formed my thinking around our connectedness. In addition to all the really like heavy connectedness that we've had to think about, and thinking about how do we teach our children about compassion and about caring for others and the ways that we are responsible for one another because we are interconnected, has been so kind of fraught with, we put on our masks to show our friends that we care so that we don't get them sick. We also get to say, is to celebrate the moments when we actually get to be together and celebrate the kind of beauty of connectedness. So I kind of wonder about how your understanding of wonder ties in with your understanding of relationships and our connectedness as people.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, let me think through how I answer this. I think thinking about in ministry, so less in my mom hat, but in my ministry hat, especially working with youth, we, on our Connect ministry trips, we bring in groups to work with people who are different than them often, folks who've experienced hunger, folks who are refugees, folks who are new to our country, and say, how do we build connections together? And one of the first things we teach is the be curious rather than judgmental. And so if you see something happening that's different than what you would normally do, what you see around us, instead of judging it, getting upset first, start with wonder. I wonder why they do that. I wonder why she's really upset. I wonder if what frustrating things have happened in her day. I wonder if this is a compoundment of all of the injustices that have been put on her. I wonder what might help with the situation. So we teach the kids how to lead with the wonder questions, which is what helps us get to know our neighbors better, right? And to be compassionate and to see our neighbors through maybe how God sees them and sees us, right? Sees what's the deepest insight and what leads us to that. And I think if we can teach our youngest kids how to always lead with wonder, and rather than needing to know the right answer, lead with being curious, that it teaches us a whole lot more compassion and openness when we approach our neighbors and people who just live life differently than we might. It helps us connect and go, oh, I wonder what I would do if I was in that situation, or I wonder what that might feel like. Is easier than you're doing it wrong, or that's not the right way, right? It connects us rather than divides us.
Yeah. That reminds me of a couple things. It reminds me of Jesus. Put on my minister hat first. And that so often Jesus responded with questions, not with answers. Questions and stories that were usually rooted in observations about the world around, and coins and seeds and birds, mustard trees, and that we are really quick to answer and very slow to question, and that leads us to some not great places often. And so I love leading first with wonder and with curiosity.
And that's what I think I get the most creative with Spencer too, is when I try to just answer his question, the conversation ends pretty quick. But when I say, well, I don't know, what do you think? Or what do you see? Then we go these much deeper, richer, more beautiful places than I would have ever lead him when I let him lead, and ask those questions and see.
Yeah, that's something that I have been thinking about a lot over the last couple of years. And especially as I was creating some of the end pieces for the book, is like, how do we learn to do this as adults? How do we reteach ourselves how to do it? And so much of it is pay attention to the kids. They do it so naturally. Questions are the first thing out of my child's mouth most days.
Yes.
It reminds me, there was the bus movement from, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. And Sister Simone Campbell was one of the kind of lead of this sort of compassion and justice movement, advocating for kind of fair treatment, especially of poor folk in the US. And they really talked about, we had 4 virtues for the 21st century, and I'm not going to remember all of them, but I remember the first couple. Cultivating joy was one. Sacred gossip, which she meant just tell the stories of our faith and our lives and our experiences and seeing those as holy.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I do too. And then holy curiosity was one of them, which was really rooted in trying to understand people who have different life experience and who understand the world differently. And just like you were kind of describing with your Connect ministry groups, to lead with the questions of what brings you to that place? What brings you to that sense of the world? Why do you feel that way? How did you get to there? And rather than focusing on the division or the pick apart, whatever their stance is, to come intentionally to those places of diversity and division, with a sense that you are also created in the image of God. How can I approach you with holy curiosity to understand who you are as a person in this moment? And
how we
which
understand,
I think is so beautiful.
Yeah. One of our central kind of education pieces we do with Connect is, I learned from Spencer, I learned from my child, and I think our children teach us how to wonder, is we have each of them split into small groups and think of an injustice in the world, something they see that really bothers them. And then they just ask why. And then they all give me an answer as to why. And then I say, okay, why again? Why again? Why again? And we do it at least 6 or 7 times. until we get down to those core things that connect us, right? Because we're afraid, because we don't trust our neighbors. And then we can get to, okay, well, then how do we work on that? And that gets us to those real sacred questions. And that's what our kids, like you said, do naturally, that can teach us how to have that compassion like God has.
Right. And I think so often when we start thinking about faith formation for children, we're like, okay, let's teach Bible stories, or let's teach them this like set of rules or precepts. And that's so antithetical to how the children exist in the world and how most children interact with their experiences, and really is beyond their conceptual abilities anyway. And so how do we take a sense of wonder and curiosity as the story for faithful families, faith engagement, and the sharing of kind of faith stories and faith values? So I also wonder how that kind of intersects in your experience of being a mom and a minister.
Yeah, I think it's learning. I've done Christian education now for years, and thought I have all these books and all the stuff we do and lessons we've taught. And I thought, oh, I will surely use this with my child. And I don't really, because what I found, some of it a little bit I do, but what I found is where we get to the most holy, the most where he's asking questions about God, we're really talking about those core things of God, is again, when I let him lead. And it's also changed the way I now do ministry with our kids. We've always done worship and wonder with our kids at church, but how we do Sunday school and all those other pieces now go more around that asking, well, what do you think? What do you see? Or noticing, like we were at the zoo the other day and there was a gorilla who was laying down and looked like he might be hurt. And so Spencer asked, well, what's wrong with him? And I said, and rather than making up something or, oh, he's behind the zookeepers, will come on, I made myself slow down, which is hard for me. And I made myself not give an answer, which is hard for me, and said, I don't know. Be able to say, I don't know. What do you think? To which he said, I bet God will take care of him. Should we pray for him? And I said, yeah, I think we should. And so, a thing I would not have done most of my life or ever, we stopped in the zoo and prayed out loud for the gorilla. And, and then kept doing it again. Oh, then we saw someone who was sick, or hurt after a car wreck. And he said, I wonder if he's like the monkey. Should we pray for him too? Maybe he needs help, right? And so when we let the children kind of lead and make those connections for themselves, they get to the places I would have wanted to teach them, but they kind of do it naturally on their own with their own wonder and questions.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I think that we are at our time to invite Brad back into the conversation.
Wonderful.
Unless there's something else that you have a burning need to say, Allison.
I'm just so excited for this opportunity and the book that you've put together, Caroline. I think it's already done a lot for Spencer and for the kids in our church and our community. And I'm really excited for the ways it teaches all of us, adults and kids alike, how to see the wonder of God more.
Thank you so much.
Now I'm concerned for the gorilla. I'm really gonna, when I'm done here, I'm gonna go to the Fort Worth Star Telegram and look and see if how the gorilla is doing.
Me too. I don't think it turned out great for the gorilla from what I further researched.
Oh dear.
But our prayers for his peace, I am certain that gorilla is now resting in God's peace.
Moment of silence for gorillas. It is interesting to see how those minds can connect dots, isn't it? That's one of the things that's always amazed me about my kids. I'm a father of three, and just the way that they can connect dots from one thing to another if you just give them the space to do that. Caroline and Allison, you both shared some great stories, and having known you all, I can see your natural inclinations to being to inviting those questions, and also know that it takes that. It's not easy to stop in the flow of the moment and ponder, especially when you're someplace where you're like at the zoo and you're on a routine. We've got 2 hours here, right, kids? But no, let's stop and look at the gorilla and think about that. So thank you again, Allison. We're grateful that you're able to join us. So we talked a little bit about how do we help the kids in our lives see wonder, but I think what makes a great book for kids is that it's actually also a great book for kids and their readers, and how it can help readers do the same kind of thing. So Caroline and I are going to talk a little bit about this book and its story and what, it's not just a children's book. That's just where it's going to show up in the different sections. So Caroline, let's dig into this a little bit. What are the first memories you have of the wonder of God's creation?
I told her I'd call her out. My mom is on this call. I am the daughter of an early childhood educator who was the first one to introduce me to finding wonder. She first taught me and my reteaching me all the things that I and so my earliest memories are filled with those moments of my mom asking, "Oh, what do you notice here?" And pointing out little things around us that brought beauty and brought creativity and reminded us that God's a creating creator. We razzed her a lot for one of these stories, but when I was in elementary school, middle grade, maybe third grade or so, we're driving through the neighborhood to school, blustery fall day, leaves start falling off the trees, and she goes, "The leaves are falling, don't miss it." We make fun of her a lot for it, but also it encapsulated this whole attitude that she brought to our childhood of, this is a beautiful moment. This is a moment that is special because the leaves are falling, and look at how they dance in the wind. And let's think about how that means the trees are part of the cycle that they're created to go through, and that brings beauty to us and nourishment to the world, and it's part of this whole ecosystem. She didn't say things when I was in third grade, but it instilled in me that sense of paying attention and understanding that all of those moments are sacred moments. We're also big outdoor nature lovers, and so most of my childhood vacations and things were camping in the mountains and just sort of being a feral child in the mountains, climbing on rocks and finding moss and bugs and whatever we could find. But also, as we would, drive through Dallas, we would look at, oh, look how beautiful the light is reflecting on the windows, and just that sense of paying attention. We're really bad at that. It's a spiritual practice, really, that goes back centuries within Christian tradition of just paying attention can be prayer. And noticing the things and the people and the movement of the world around us is being attuned to the presence of God.
Yeah, when you mentioned the light reflecting off the windows, I mean, you're from Dallas, I'm from Oklahoma City, and you do get those magnificent sunsets that can do strange things to your skyline. And if you're paying attention at the right time of day, that's a pretty incredible sight, especially with a skyline as huge as Dallas's is. But you can see it for miles and miles and miles. But so it sounds to me you're seeing beyond nature, and you're seeing the human creation as well, and being able to see the wonder in that. So that expands out to things like art and architecture and even into music. Are you seeing that with Campbell?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we live in Houston, which is a city actually sort of known for street art and graffiti and murals. And so one of our favorite things to do is go around the city of Houston and see the things people have created, and the ways that brings a sense of place to where we are, what it teaches us about our neighbors, and that it invites us into different pieces of history. There are murals of different historical figures and events across town. There are just celebrations of color and beauty, and details in, we live in a town that's not too far from a historic part of town called the Third Ward that has shotgun houses, and that teaches about a community. And when you pay attention, notice, oh, the houses look different in this part of town. I wonder why. And then you start looking into that history. There's this rich cultural tradition that is marked by this different style of house, and how do we learn about our neighbors and appreciate our neighbors and our communities, and learn about the challenges that are in our city, and that our neighbors are facing that are related to that history.
Yeah, so you're connecting in social justice on this as well, as no surprise there. And so, yeah, how do we find the parts of the creation around us that are telling us parts of a bigger story as well? And you can see that in Houston, Texas, or Houston, Missouri. It doesn't take much to see those differences. You're right. So let's talk a little bit about the book and its origin story. I love the origin story of your book. Can we share that with us, please?
Sure. I mean, I touched on it a little bit. We were in the early days of pandemic. And so my conception of what it was going to mean to be a toddler parent was changing. And we were spending a lot of time in our backyard and a lot of time coloring. And so we would just throw out cardboard on our living room floor, give them the crayons, and hang out. And I would try and work on the side and then color for a little bit. And it just started charting out a book that was inspired by what I was watching in Campbell's life, in red crayon on a cardboard box, and structuring the book in part because I wanted to read something different than what we were reading, not because what we were reading was bad. I loved the books, the 3 books that were on endless repeat in our world. Global Babies, My Big Emotions, and How to Find a Rock. No, everybody needs a rock. Everybody needs a rock. And Global Babies and Big Emotions were authorless books, but just of photographs of children. And Campbell was just enthralled looking at pictures of these kids. And I felt like, okay, this is exposure, at least to faces that are not his dad and me, which was his whole world at that point.
Yeah.
And then Everybody Needs a Rock is sort of a counting style book that is about noticing things about rocks, and that collecting rocks can lead you to all these other things in the world. And so inspired by kind of those 2 threads, conceptualized this book that I thought was just going to go to our family as a nice butterfly Christmas gift. And at the same time, I was part of a writers group hosted by a local church here in Houston called Holy Family. And so it's what I took group one week, and they helped me expand it out and really turn it into what it is now. And one of the other parents in that writers group and I were having conversations about what it means to be a parent, and a parent who wants to instill a passion for faith for our kids in 2020 and early 2021 in this particular world and this particular moment, going through the pandemic and the racial reckoning of this current racial reckoning, and then the January 6th events. And so many things were layered with Christian imagery and these moments where some of the more dogmatic faith of some of my friends' childhoods it wasn't working anymore. And we didn't know how to be faithful parents and raise children who could be open to faith in such a world. And we kept coming back to this sense of wonder and holy curiosity. And how do we celebrate that God created the world good, God created us good, that God is still creating and we're all connected, and that God is continually recreating and redeeming this world, which was a message we really needed to hear ourselves over the past 2 years. And so that's a really lofty kind of intention to hold in a children's book with like 65 words, but It's sort of where we were in our souls and
Yeah.
didn't have a lot of places, that met that need.
Yeah. So so you know, you're not the only person that was reading Global Babies. That was Spencer's favorite for a while, Allison reported. And I look forward to learning about Campbell's geological explorations of the world in the future as a fellow rock collector. You're talking about the social justice aspects of the 2020 summertime, the racial unrest following the death of George Floyd and all the other stuff that was churning up at that point. But and so I know that as we were developing this book, one of the key things that emerged right away was a need for diversity and to make sure that every child can see themselves in that book somehow. So talk a little bit about what you did to make sure that happened, because it's a pretty darn cool story. I love this aspect of Wonder Awaits.
Well, I just knew that it was really narcissistic for me to publish a book that was all pictures of my little blue-eyed white boy child.
It would not be unprecedented.
But more importantly, I really wanted kids to recognize the book, both in terms of kind of racial and ethnic identity, but also location and ability, physical ability, to see we are all created in the image of God, and they're for all of us, and in all of us. And so I just mostly started reaching out to friends and family to try and represent as many different experiences as I could. And I already know, even looking through it now, I'm like, oh, we could have done this or this, and we could have, always striving for better, right? But really wanting kids to see themselves in the book and to see kids who don't look anything like them, and to be able to appreciate and notice the diversity of this beautiful humanity that is around us, that is part of the wonder of God's creation, is the differences that are among us, and to celebrate those differences. And I've learned from a great anti-racism, anti-bias educator, Britt Hawthorne, about, she's been a great resource to me as a parent, about helping kids notice those differences in ways that celebrate the difference, because kids are going to notice. Campbell likes to point out, I have curly hair. Mommy, you have straight hair. We do that a lot. And so celebrate those differences and help kids have a foundation that recognizes those as God-given, I think is really important.
Yeah. So share a little bit about how you collected these photos. This isn't stock art off of, gettyart.com or anything. This is homemade.
Yeah, this is me begging people I know to be part of my thing. It's friends and colleagues and family members who I reached out to and said, hey, I've written this thing and we have interest in the publisher, and I'm looking to have more kids represented in it. Would you be willing to share a bit of your life? And would your kids be willing to share a bit of their lives? And most of them were too young to really understand that permission, but we tried to ask, do you want to be in a book? And really wanted them to pull from their own collections of photos. So these are all snapshots from their actual lives.
Yeah. That picture right there, that's a beauty. That's just one of my favorites.
I know. Is there any bravery better than that first haircut?
You cannot pose that photo.
Exactly. And kids experience wonder so viscerally, and you can't capture that with a staged photo. And I really wanted it to be the diversity of experiences of their real lives. That wonder is available to us. Yes, if you live in Seattle and the park has these phenomenal giant trees that speak to the interconnectedness and like ancient reality of our world, and also in the barbershop and with a toilet paper tube and in a backyard, that wonder is everywhere, always accessible to us if we are seeking it. That we don't have to go to a national park, although Chalice Press also does publish that one.
Nice plug. Thank you.
You're welcome. But that God created all of the world, and that if we're paying attention, we can notice it.
Yeah. If you want to talk about weird places to find wonder, one of my favorite stories about my daughter is when she saw oil leaking from the USS Arizona at Pearl Harbor, and she saw a rainbow in the water. She didn't know what it was. She was still trying to understand what we were seeing, but she was able to see something that caught her attention and made her wonder what the heck that was. And it opened a way for her to understand an old story that was new to her. But you're right. You don't have to be in a national park. You can be anywhere and just paying attention.
Right.
And
and part of the end matter at the book, the engagement piece, saying that end matter was trying to give some opportunities for families to reach back to those moments where you notice your child noticing something,
right,
and to help make meaning around it. Because the oil in the water at Pearl Harbor could just be, oh, look, a beautiful rainbow.
Right.
It can also be this entry into a complicated story, a heavy story, but also a story where we can say, and look, how do we make beauty out of that? Where do we find moments of possibility and redemption and hope? And what do we need to do? Because the leaking of oil into our ocean is also a heavy thing, and a thing that is deserving of some grief. And so to hold all those tensions, and those are not all going to be, appropriate the first time you think about that experience, but over time, if we're inviting those kinds of conversations and that noticing, I think is really key, and that we can open those conversations in the future, which then comes back to that moment of connection and deepens our relationships as caregivers with the children in our lives, which has a ripple effect. Right. It opens up that they can ask other questions about hard things and about faith things, and about, well, I thought this one way, but maybe there's another way to think about it. And if we are already having some of these conversations about other noticings and other questionings, then questions aren't a scary thing or a dangerous thing. And when they have questions about faith, they know that they can ask those questions.
So you're saying questions aren't dangerous? There are some people who would disagree with you on that one. Unfortunately, I am fully in your camp as coming from a denomination, from the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, that constantly begs the question. That's what we do. We take pride in being questioners, and I that's one of the things that made Wonder Awaits such an easy call for us, is that questioning and getting it built in young. So,
well, and I think as a parent, it's so intimidating because, I have an advanced theological degree and several years of pastoral ministry, and now disaster response ministry under my belt. And I don't feel prepared to answer some of the questions that are already coming out of my 2.5-year-old's mouth. And so I understand, I sympathize with that level of intimidation. I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah.
So maybe I should just not encourage questions. And I hope that the foundation of this book starts very early.
Mm-hmm.
The practice of asking questions that maybe don't have an answer.
Yeah.
Some of the examples in the practice questioning line are imaginative questions that we cannot possibly answer. And just the practice of asking the question is the point.
Yeah.
And hopefully that gives us it trains those muscles as caregivers and as people of faith ourselves to be able to ask questions without expecting an answer.
Right. And as awkward as it is to be able to say, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know everything, right? And as much as society wants us to know, or to present that we know the answer to everything, we just don't know. And it's okay to say that from time to time. One of the things that you've built a book around are these three phrases that are actually on the back of the book. Wonder is feeling, wonder is questioning, and wonder is noticing. Dig into that just a little bit more on feeling and questioning and noticing. How can we as grown-ups do that a little more frequently than we do?
Those lines are in there for the grown-ups.
Sneaky.
Sneaky. The kids get it too, and I remember in an early workshop of the book, some of the readers said, "Are these words too advanced for toddlers?" I said, "Well, words are words. We teach all kids what they mean. 5 was too advanced for a toddler at one point, and so let's teach them these words. They're great words, but also they're in there for the parents, for the caregivers, for the other adults in the child's life, because we often use words without exploring what they really mean. And so we think we know what we mean when we say wonder until you start unpacking it. And wonder is a lot of things. And so I picked those 3 because they seemed to me to capture sort of the different aspects of wonder. Wonder that is just awe, that is just that feeling of, I'm part of something bigger than me. This is so much beyond small me, and how great is it that I'm part of it? Wonder is noticing, is that practice. It's that taking stock of what's around, paying attention, which we've talked about so much tonight, and questioning. But I wonder what happens if I wonder what will happen next. I wonder why this happens or that happens, or I wonder if the birds have names. We wonder all kinds of things in our house that don't have answers, but are just kind of fun to think about and practice that questioning muscle, and that curiosity muscle. And I'm so grateful to my fabulous partner, Jeremy, who did the illustrations for those last pages, that I voluntold him into doing, and that he did so graciously and wonderfully.
He did, yes. And that's going to be another fun part, is to look back at that in 5 years and 10 years and 15 years and 25 years and show future families crayon doodlings or whatever it is that you all jot in the back there, and what was wondrous to Campbell when he was 4. Those are the kind of books that kids look back at forever and ever, and hold on to, and just can't let go of. That's the hope, right? Yeah. And so back here at the back, you've given a note to adults. That's the part that's overtly for adults, but right. But you pulled up about a dozen scriptures or so, and so just the Bible is full of places where we see God's wonder. Expand on that, Reverend Hamilton-Arnold, for me.
Well, I said from the outset, if all this book does is create that foundation of curiosity and a sense of kids being aware of the world around them, that's a win. Yeah. But also, I was intending this as a faith formation resource for families, because I was seeing a need for it in my circle of friends. And so to give some access points to, if you want to layer the stories of faith, the stories that we have inherited as witness to how people have been in relationship with this creator God over millennia, then here are some entry points. And it is certainly not an exhaustive list. Why the heck I did not include John 1 and the beautiful prologue about the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and in the beginning all things were created through him. Why I did not include that keeps me up at night.
Second edition.
So not an exhaustive list by any means, but I wanted to give some examples of how folks could take scripture, engage those stories from our tradition that we have carried for those of us who identify as Christian, and explore these same questions of what do you notice? What do you wonder when you read these texts? And I tried to give some short description of where my brain went with those scriptures, knowing that that is a somewhat frightening place to invite people into. But to say, Song of Songs, not typically a book that we recommend for 3 and 4-year-olds, but with some choice selections to say, God made our bodies. Aren't our bodies wonderful? Look how beautiful our skin is. Look at the different colors of skin of the people around us. Aren't they beautiful? Didn't God create such a gorgeous palette of humans? And that can be pulled from that witness in scripture. And then, the Psalms are chock full of, the heavens are full of the handiwork of God. If you're a memory verse type, if that works for your family, those are some great places to grab.
Finally, you note that the proceeds from Wonder Awaits will benefit Week of Compassion. Tell us just a little bit about what Week of Compassion does. What a great ministry it is.
Yeah, I'm rather fond. Of course, I'm a little partial. Week of Compassion is the Relief, Refugee, and Development Mission Fund for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Our mission is to work with partners to alleviate suffering around the world with a vision of God's people transforming suffering into hope. I love that mission. I love that vision. Essentially, that means we are connecting disciple resources, people, information, and money to places of crisis and need around the world. So sometimes that's natural disasters. Sometimes it's human-caused disasters. Sometimes it's the displacement of people, like we are seeing with our siblings in Ukraine right now, and our siblings from Afghanistan who are still in the midst of such significant evacuation, and so many other places around the world. And then also the extreme need of extraordinary poverty that still exists in our world. And so we work with partners for sustainable economic and community development, largely focused on the empowerment of women and children through education, agriculture, economic advancement, and kind of safeguarding for children and women. And then humanitarian aid and assistance following those various crises. And we have a number of partners that are really focused on the well-being of children in all of those kind of ministry areas.
Right. One of the things I admire about Week of Compassion is how forward-facing it is, looking down the future, especially the sustainable development part, which enriches the lives of everybody who comes in contact with it, and the long-term. We're here for the long haul aspect of that, and I'm always grateful for what Week of Compassion has done. I mean, I know that, for instance, even on Saturday when the tornadoes touched down in Iowa, Week of Compassion was on top of that immediately, and conference calls with your partners in Europe to talk about the Ukrainian migrations going on right now. So all from a variety of different locations all across the country with you and V and Courtney and your new staff members working. It's a small team doing a lot of good work, and so I know we're grateful for it and wish you all the best luck on that.
Thank you very much. It's an exciting thing for me that this book can help fund work that really is focused on making sure that all people have the opportunity to live full lives, that they can thrive in this world that God has created, and that all people have the opportunity to experience wonder and wonderful lives, even in the midst of so much hardship. And one of my early church memories is collecting and offering for Week of Compassion. And so it was one of the ways that I began to understand my sense of myself in relation to the rest of the world, and my appreciation of the rest of the world, and that we are all one one body and one human family, and all created by God in the image of God. And so for this book to support that work is really exciting for me.
I believe I'm going to end that paragraph with amen. It's a prayer. It's a prayer for all of us, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for you, Caroline, and thank you for what you have done for us and what your ideas are going to be doing for the readers of this book. And so if you don't already have a copy of Wonder Awaits, there's a couple of ways you can get it. It's very simple. You can go to chalicepress.com, order it there. You can order it from Chalice Press's customer service number. If you need that phone number, it's on the front page of chalicepress.com if you just like that personal touch. You can also go down to your local bookstore, and if they don't have it on the shelves, they will order it for you. They can get any book you're looking for if it's available. So go support your local bookstores. And if you need to order it from one of the larger places that you know delivers books, that's fine too. So anyhow, Caroline and Allison, thank you both for being with us tonight. We're grateful for all of you who are able to join us this evening, and hope you learned some helpful tips on keeping those big eyes that are around you all the time, looking at our big world. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of the week, and take care. Good night.